Hey y'all, it's K-Bird Tweets, and this is Peace, Love, and Baseball. Welcome back to this week's episode of Peace, Love, and Baseball. I am your host, K-Bird Tweets, and it is officially opening week of Major League Baseball 2024. All 30 teams will play games that count this week. Make sure that you have found me on Twitter at KBirdTweets to keep up with all the day-to-day, kind of play-by-play, game-by-game action and fun interaction that we will have together throughout the season. If you are watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button so that you won't miss every episode that is going to be coming out now multiple times a week. We've got a little announcement in today's show. And then, of course, we're on Facebook. Our Facebook page is Peace, Love, and Baseball, and on Instagram at peace.love.baseball. Make sure you're subscribed if you're listening on your favorite podcast platform. And I appreciate you being here. We are featuring the oldest team in all of baseball. And no, not the way that the St. Louis Cardinals team is old this season, but the oldest team to originate in the history of baseball, and that is the Cincinnati Reds for our team feature this week. We will be joined by Reds faithful John and Jules in a bit, but first, it is time for This Week in Peace, Love, and Baseball. We're going to be a little heavy on the baseball this week because, we're celebrating its full return to our everyday lives this week. There is peace and love in baseball. And that's really what we're going to talk about here to kick off today's episode. For peace, I don't know about you, but I find a lot of peace in baseball. The meditativeness and the comfort of having baseball on every night. There's no more like sitting down and clicking through the 19 different shows on Netflix or Hulu or Max or whatever. Like, you don't even have to think about what you're going to watch because surely there's going to be at least one baseball game on you can turn on and enjoy one way or another. There's the community around the game. Even if it's an online community, you have your people that you're going to be able to interact with more and just all kinds of fun that sparks from the excitement and the action of, 15 plus Major League Baseball games. I guess there would be 15 max Major League Baseball games going on every day, but you know what I mean? There's plenty of game action every single day for the next 6 months, which is just makes my heart happy. It is where I find my peace. All kinds of community, whether it's group chats, whether it's on Twitter, whether it's on your Discords or your fantasy leagues, just all the good feels around that kind of stuff. And if you found us, you have found a community where you are welcome to have a lot of fun, positive, respectful interaction. For our love this week, we're going to promote, the Peace, Love, and Baseball merch. It is here. I told you about it last week. We dropped it early last week. We are adding more designs, so please feel free to share your requests as well. Going to pop up here and show you the Peace, Love, and Baseball collection. We've got a few different logos we're trying out there that I think are all really cute and cool. And then, of course, we've got some Tommy Edman merch. We've got more Tommy Edman stuff in the works. If you're watching on YouTube, I'm showing you off a couple of our designs on the screen here, and the link to find all of this merch you can find by following me on Twitter, because I don't think YouTube will let me actually link it in the show notes for you. But if you're listening, I've linked it in the show notes for you. Not difficult to find where you can get this stuff. And then the Vibes collection is growing, and you can get it on literally anything from a t-shirt to a hoodie to a baseball tee, a mug, stickers, phone cases. I ordered a phone case, so I'll let you know how that turns out. But check it out. All kinds of good stuff there. Also, I don't know, maybe it's just me, but is it like so fun deciding what you're going to wear to games? I think so. Like, are you going to rep a specific player? Is it freezing where your team plays? So you have to wear like a cool beanie or a jacket that you've invested in for the first couple months and the last couple months of play. Let's see your opening day fit. I'm looking forward to seeing those all around the league, all around baseball, of all the different fandoms that we connect with here. I am going to baseball in Philly actually before I'm going to baseball in St. Louis because the Cardinals do not open at home and I will be out on the East Coast this next weekend. But yeah, I've got a pullover with some sequin baseballs on it that I think I'm going to wear in Philly. And it's red. So, it's not Cardinals specific, but it's not Philly specific either. I think I'll fit right in. I'm going to an Iron Pigs game, which I think I've talked about is the AAA team for the Phillies in Pennsylvania. I've got a sweet Iron Pigs hoodie. Their merch is elite. They have a lot of really fun designs. So if you're someone who just likes repping baseball and the fun around it and the community aspect of it, check out the Iron Pigs merch. They have so much fun stuff, whether it's like bacon themed or they're going to be the Iron Cats. They have some really fun cat themed stuff. So like if you're a cat lady but also a baseball fan, I'm raising my hand. It's okay. We're out here. Iron Pigs are all over it for you. A couple other merch stores that I wanted to shout out because I think on opening day, you're going to see me wearing my Wilson is my catcher shirt from that There Is Crying in Baseball podcast. I got that. It's super soft and comfy, really high quality tee, and the designs are super cute. And then my friend Jana, who is a Yankees fan, but don't worry, her merch is definitely not exclusive to Yankees. She has put out her merch under her 108 Stitch Co. brand, and she's just rolling out new stuff every day. She's got a really cool Joey Votto design. She's got some Cubs stuff, some Yankee stuff, obviously some Phillies stuff, and she just keeps pumping it out. So if you are needing some like fan fresh merch, you're just looking for something cool, it's kind of treat yourself to celebrate the beginning of the season. It's all over the place for you. It's here at Peace, Love, and Baseball. It's with our friends of the show. And a lot of this stuff is not only is it like more original, but it's way more affordable than Fanatics charging us for whatever lack of quality they seem to be rolling out these days. So I don't know. I just think it's fun to try out some different stuff. And I'm also on my way right after this to get my opening day manicure. So I'm going to try to get a little baseball design. So stay tuned for that. I just think stuff like that is so fun and it makes you feel good and it kind of, plays into the excitement. So show me your opening day fit, tweet me a picture. We'll start a thread and just have some fun with it. This week in Peace, Love, and Baseball. So for baseball this week, our announcement is that we're going to add weekly Cardinals content to Peace, Love, and Baseball, to the Peace, Love, and Baseball rotation. So I think we're going to do it on Sunday nights. That seems to be the most popular option that's going to work for everyone, more or less the best. So Sunday nights, we will have our St. Louis Cardinals season scrapbook episodes where we do a recap of what's going on and off the field, specifically for the St. Louis Cardinals. I obviously am a St. Louis Cardinals fan. I follow that team most closely, and I like to cover all of baseball on this podcast. We'll keep doing our team features. Like this stuff is still going to be pumped out for you every week on Tuesday, but Sunday nights we'll go live. We'll have a live chat with your questions, your participation, your requests. And jump in the live chat if you can, because that'll be super fun to talk about what's been going on and the games that we've been following all week. And then those episodes that will be recorded live on Sunday nights will be available in your Peace, Love, and Baseball podcast feeds the next day. So on Monday mornings, you will see those starting April 8th. So our first live will be on April 7th after that first full week of baseball. If you are not specifically a St. Louis Cardinals fan, like I said, don't worry. Still going to have all your good, fully comprehensive baseball content here. We'll keep doing our team features. We'll do specific interview episodes or highlights on different things around the game throughout the whole season. And then I'm also over weekly at Bourbon and Baseball with Susie, where we cover all of the balls. We cover all of the hottest headlines. We started a really fun segment for the season where we are placing bets on vibes. So we are not big gamblers on baseball of any kind, or, we don't want to talk about the over under, the plus 500s, the negative 1500s. Like, I have no freaking clue, and because I don't care. But what I do want to talk about is, will Robbie Ray or Spencer Strider have tighter pants this season? And that's what I want to put my pick down on. So that's the kind of fun that we're having over there. And you can be a part of that too. So I'll link that latest episode in the show notes as usual. And just a great rundown to keep you up to date on everything that is going on in Major League Baseball, along with that kind of silly fun and engagement that I know at least some of us are looking for, right? Well, let's get down to business with our team feature as we learn about the Cincinnati Reds franchise this week with John and Jules. And I wanted to do this team feature specifically during opening week because not only do the Reds have the distinction of being the first team, they are also the team that I personally think could give the Cardinals, with any luck, the Cardinals will be at the top competing for that National Central Division title. But I think the Reds might be the other most competitive team, or, the most competitive team. Who knows? But the point is, I think they're worth really paying attention to this season, especially if you're an NL Central fan. So with no further ado, let's get to our Cincinnati Reds coverage with John and Jules. It is Cincinnati Reds week here on Peace, Love, and Baseball, and I am joined by two wonderful guests now to really bring us fully into the Cincinnati Reds culture. Want you to welcome in John Owski and not so cool Jules. We think you're cool, Jules, but that's where people will know you from on social media. You are now officially our resident Cincinnati Reds fans here on Peace, Love, and Baseball. Now, I know you're both so ready for opening day, which is just mere hours away from when we are releasing this episode. John, how ready are you for baseball season to start?
Well, we're recording this on Thursday, a week before opening day.
Yeah.
And on this day, the previous week, I was on my way to Florida to see spring training and went to 5 games in 4 days. And that did not help my fix of baseball whatsoever because I did not get to see the Reds down there. But I am incredibly ready for opening day. I am not planning on going to opening day in Cincinnati in a week just because I live in Cleveland. But I am taking my wife and my son to the Saturday game, which is kids opening day.
Awesome.
And I'm very excited for that. So
spring training just got you kind of like warmed up and ready, both physically and mentally, for baseball. Jules, you were recently at spring training as well, right?
Yeah, I was at spring training in Arizona. We went to we're technically supposed to go to 4 Reds games. We stayed a whole week, but we only made it to 3 because the Friday, the last game we're supposed to go to at Goodyear against the Royals, it rained in the desert, which is always a rare thing, right? But the thing is it was raining. Like, it wasn't storming, whatever. I get it. Like, it's spring training. It's not that deep. They're not going to push to get in a game that no one cares about. Really. But they literally called it after 30 minutes of a delay. I'm not even kidding you. 10 minutes later, we're leaving the ballpark and we see the blue sky on the other side. I'm like, you guys just had to wait 10 more minutes. 10 more minutes. That's all you had to do. But they couldn't even do that. It's fine. I get it. Y'all didn't want to play. You could have just said that. They were probably already out of the ballpark before the 30-minute delay. So,
yeah.
It's fine now.
That's how spring training goes.
I had a great time.
At this point, you only have to wait mere minutes for real meaningful baseball. And I can feel spring in the air, not because of the temperature here in Chicago by any means, but because baseball is so near. Well, I'm excited for our conversation today because John has been on the podcast before, so you may or may not know a plethora of things about him and his Reds fandom, but he is a baseball book connoisseur, a bit of a history buff around the game. And Jules is like a young, hip fan proving that baseball is like still cool with the cool kids. So I think that we will have a fun dynamic here. I want to kick things off by just asking you, John, how did you become a Reds fan?
So my story is going to basically be, I think you would ask most any person. My dad was a Reds fan. He was kind of fortunate to be in his early teenage years during the Big Red Machine era. So that kind of rubbed off on me. And I'm originally from Toledo, Ohio. So if you're in that area, most fans are either Tigers or now Guardians fans. So it was kind of nice to root for a team that was different than everyone else at the same time. I didn't get more into baseball till I got older, to be perfectly honest. But my dad and my grandpa took me to my first Reds game back when they still played at Riverfront. And I don't remember a ton about that game, but it was like the season after they got Ken Griffey Jr.
Ooh, yeah. We're going to talk all about that.
They were in the process of building Great American Ballpark at the time.
Mhm.
And I remember seeing both him and Mark McGwire hit home runs in that game. Griffey's being into the construction site of now Great American Ballpark. So I was pretty much from there, which is funny because my dad's a Reds fan, my mom's a Tigers fan. So I do have, and I live in Cleveland, so I kind of have a soft spot for all three teams, but the Reds definitely trump everything else.
Yeah, I love how true you have stayed to your Reds fandom while still being like such a just pure fan of the game itself. Jules, is the Reds a family thing for you too?
Kind of similar. My dad was a Reds fan, and like when he was really young, he was actually an A's fan, and then he hopped off that bandwagon. Why he was an A's fan, I don't know. I guess he used to be pretty exciting back then. I wouldn't know though. But yeah, I got it from him. I did not grow up in Cincinnati. I grew up in the Lima area. You may know what Lima is, John, but not much going on there. I grew up in an extremely small town right outside of Lima. And so we would drive 2 hours to 1 or 2 Reds games a summer if I was lucky. I would say Joey Votto has been in the Reds organization since I was 2 years old, which is crazy. Like, so I've never seen the Reds without him at all. So my first memory and my first player that I knew was Joey Votto. And I also played softball. So that's where my love for the sport in general also comes from. And I would try to, I would go to games and really think about how I could elevate my game by watching these players. And Joey Votto was definitely one of those guys that I really focused on. So that is definitely my first memory, is my obsession with Joey Votto as a kid. And then it continued as I grew up. So yeah.
As a Cardinals fan, I can relate closely to having like those franchise icons where I literally do not remember baseball without, Albert Pujols, Yadier Molina, Adam Wainwright. And it is really cool that the Reds have had multiple players like that who are just like such fixtures of the franchise. Well, I'm going to take us on a walk back through time here, all the way back to 1876. When Cincinnati became one of the charter members of the new National League, but they quickly got into trouble with the league organizer and President William Hubert for selling beer during games and renting out their ballpark on Sundays. Big no-no, I guess, back in 1876. These were important initiatives in enticing the city's large German population to support the team, though, so they had to do it. While the president of the league made it well known that he did not support beer nor Sunday baseball at the founding of the league, neither of these things were against the rules at the time. So they weren't breaking the rules. They just knew that it was kind of frowned upon. So in late 1880, 7 of the 8 team owners voted to ban both beer and Sunday baseball, and only Cincinnati president W.H. Kennett refused to sign this pledge. So the other owners preemptively expelled Cincinnati from the league for violating the new rules, even though they were not yet in effect. I did not know that the Reds were troublemakers from the start. But I cannot imagine a world without beer at games and Sunday baseball. John, did you know this about the origin of the Reds?
I did, actually. So and I'm sure you'll go on to explain, the Reds were the first to do many things, but to a degree, I'm maybe the most proud of the fact that they got kicked out of baseball for selling beer at games.
That's awesome. That is awesome.
Is there anything better? than beer at a Sunday baseball game. Like, come on.
Nothing better.
I can't blame them. So the Reds became a charter member of a different league after they got kicked out of that, called the AA, and they won the inaugural pennant in 1882. The Cincinnati Red Stockings, as they were then known, left the American Association on November 14th of 1889, and they joined the National League once again. I guess they didn't care about such scandalous things like beer and Sunday baseball because the National League was expanding. The American Association was starting to dismantle. This is when they shortened their names to the Reds. So at the start of the 20th century, the Reds had hitting stars Sam Crawford and Cy Seymour. Seymour's .377 average in 1905 was the first individual batting crown won by a Red. In 1911, Bob Bescher stole 81 bases, which is still to this day a team record. But not unlike the previous decade, the Reds were not particularly competitive in the early decades of the 1900s. They were actually bought out of bankruptcy in 1933 by the Crosley brothers. Am I saying that right? Crosley?
Yes.
Cool. All kinds of firsts happened, as you mentioned, John, within the Reds organization over the next decade. Some of them were very cool and some were kind of weird. The Reds' home stadium at this time, Crosley Field, became the host of the first night game in 1935, which was also the first baseball fireworks night. These are like staples of baseball culture, right? And the Reds were the first to do it. Johnny Vandermeer became the only pitcher in Major League history to throw back-to-back no-hitters in 1938. And by 1939, the Reds were National League champions, but they were swept in the World Series by the New York Yankees. In 1940, the Reds repeated as NL champions, and for the first time in 21 years, they beat the Detroit Tigers to win a world championship. The team starts to struggle quite a bit again throughout the 40s and the 50s, so much, in fact, that in 1944, Joe Nuxhall, who would later become part of their radio broadcasting team, was 15 years old when he pitched for the Reds on loan from Wilson Junior High School in Hamilton, Ohio. So he became the youngest player to ever appear in a Major League game, and that record still stands today. That is just one of the many unique things about the Reds franchise. But I want to ask you guys, because I think that there are a lot of things, like just cultural wise, that make franchises unique. Jules, is there something specific that you can think of about the Reds franchise that makes them unique to other franchises in Major League Baseball, whether it's like a random fact like this or just something about the environment?
I would say I got to start with opening day. Every opening day for us, except for in, circumstances where there's weather or a lockout, we start at home. And it's such a big deal here. I tell everyone this, like,
That's right.
I truly believe it has to be an objective 100% fact that no one does opening day like Cincinnati does. I am taking 2 days off for opening day.
Ooh.
Like, there's parties all up until opening day. Like this weekend, I know there's one for like different, company sponsors. I'm going to an opening day eve party at Moreline the night before. Like, it's a huge deal. I live right by the ballpark, so I'm throwing a party. You cannot, like, after like 10:30, you cannot move down here. If you want to go to the banks, you get here at like 9 a.m. There's a parade at 12. It is,
Wow.
I've never seen so many people in one spot. And like everyone, and I'm not going to bring up that argument, but at the same time, I'm a baseball fan. I don't really care about the Bengals. I'm not, my NFL team, it's a long story. It's not the Bengals. I'll put it that way. But it's just, it's so different. And I truly don't believe anyone does it like that. Anyone I've talked to, they're like, oh, I mean, yeah, it's a big deal here, but we don't do all that. I mean, there's something everywhere. There's tailgates everywhere. There's little booths. Like, it's just, it's the coolest thing ever. And I'm going. So I spent a lot of money on those tickets.
Jules, you got a lot of Cardinals fans listening in here, and opening day is pretty damn special in St. Louis. So I'm sure I want to challenge them to listen in, to trust this process and
trust the source.
Because
trust me, bro.
John has told me about this opening day before, and as special as I know that opening day is in St. Louis, it sounds like if anybody can rival it, it definitely is the Reds. John, you've been to opening day in Cincinnati before, yeah?
Yeah, so actually to backtrack a little bit, one of the reasons opening day is so big in Cincinnati is they don't do this anymore, but since Cincinnati is the oldest Major League Baseball team,
Mhm.
they always used to be rewarded with being the first game of the season.
Oh, so they would play
Before.
before everyone else too.
They get the earliest start time on opening day.
Still
I think that's one big reason why it turned into basically a holiday
Yeah.
in the city.
Yeah.
I mean, I went to opening day in 2017, and that was back when the Reds were abysmal. To the point that the opening day starter for the Reds was Scott Feldman at the time. So that
We're like,
just
who?
those couple years of Reds fandom were hard. I'm not gonna lie. You know, that was the
People
time
still,
period.
like, they still showed up and showed out even in years like that?
Easily sold out game. Easily, it's a whole party downtown. It's if you are a Reds fan and you are not able to regularly go to opening day, I highly recommend at least one time in your life coming in a day or two before and staying downtown and experiencing it fully as you can.
That's
So
so cool. It really sounds like it is more of like an unofficial holiday.
Yeah, I don't know
In-
why
in-
it's like not officially one here.
Right?
It's ridiculous because everyone takes off anyways. I work right downtown, and like almost everyone's taking off. I'm literally just like, hey, I'm taking off these 2 days for opening day. It's like, okay.
Mm.
Like, I mean, not
Yeah.
that they're gonna say no, but like, it's just
I
like
opening
crazy.
day is basically Christmas to me. And
Oh yeah.
you know, I have other obligations in life at this point that make it hard to take time off at that. But even I'm working opening day, but I told my boss I am leaving at 3:00 no matter what is happening. And I am going to be home to watch the Reds. And he said, I kind of surprised you're working today in general.
Yeah, he's like, no worries. Thanks for showing up at all. We
Yeah.
love to hear that. We love that kind of supportive boss.
Oh, so excited.
Yes.
Well, let's dive into a little more history here. In April of 1953, the Reds announced a preference to be called the Red Legs, saying that the name of the club had been called the Red Stockings and then the Red Legs. So they were kind of like, yeah, we were never like the Reds. We're the Red Legs. But it was speculated that this was due to the developing political connotation of the word red to mean communism. So I guess I get why they didn't want to be associated with that. In 1956, actually, the club's logo was altered to remove the term Reds from the inside of the C symbol, and the traditional home uniform logo was reinstated then in 1967 once that connotation wasn't so prevalent. The Reds won the 1961 National League pennant, but were once again defeated by those damn New York Yankees in the
God, I
World
hate the
Series. Yeah, do the Reds fans hate the Yankees?
I do, but I just hate them because I hate them because they're not my team. I just I can't deal with it. Like I hate them because they're good. Like
Sure.
and I will say I've always disliked them, but when they were throwing stuff, their fans were throwing stuff at Cleveland Guardians players a few years back. No,
Yes.
that angered me so much.
Yeah, that kind of behavior is just
That
not
is
great.
ridiculous because no one else does that, and they do that all the time. They're yelling all these slurs and everything. I'm like, I know it's not all of them, but I hate y'all.
Right.
Not all.
Right.
Most.
Literal human trash behavior. Yes. John, who is your most hated team as a fan?
You know this answer.
I'm I'm trying not to laugh because I do know the answer, but tell us about it and tell us why.
So I guess a little bit. I dislike the Yankees as well. I think because I don't think there's anyone that's indifferent about the Yankees. You either love them or you hate them. I don't think there's a middle ground. But as a fan of a National League team, they're a team I don't have to worry about most of the time. So I dislike them, but it is what it is. We play them once a year at this point. So I was just having this conversation with my dad. So my most disliked team is shockingly the St. Louis Cardinals. And for reasons I think any Cardinals or Reds fans can assume on there. But we were having this conversation because my dad does not dislike the Cardinals. He is okay with them, but he strongly dislikes the Dodgers because back in the Big Red Machine days, they were the rival of the Reds. They were the two teams that went up against each other. Believe it or not, they were in the same division at that time. They were both in the NL West.
Right.
So,
how weird.
Yeah.
That is so interesting.
I do remember that history.
Yeah. So
depending on the age of your fandom, it's definitely different.
Yeah, because
rival
like
hit.
the backtrack, like I talked to my dad about this. He could not stand the Oakland A's, but
Yeah.
they were
Oh,
good
yeah,
in the
that's right.
70s and beat the Reds in the World Series. They, there's a lot of satisfaction in them Reds beating the A's in 1990 and sweeping them. But it's definitely a generational thing. So like back in his day, the Cardinals weren't anything. They weren't even. I think they were in the East. If I'm
I think you're right. Probably
accurate
better.
on that. So they
Mhm.
weren't a team that he, really thought about,
Mhm.
particularly with how baseball was played back then. So for me, I mean, I definitely don't like the Cardinals, but I hold a pretty strong vendetta against the entire city of Pittsburgh for sports.
Yeah, same.
But that living in Cleveland does not help that either. And then I definitely can't root for the Cubs at the same time. I'm actually pretty okay with the Brewers. Like I know they kicked their butts last
I
year, but
feel like
like they're cool with me.
No one is
no one
threatened by the
hates the
Brewers, you
Brewers.
guys.
Yeah.
Is it because
No
they're
one
not
does.
threatening? Like, I don't know.
They're
I
just
think it
like
might be because
there. They're good, but like their players are cool. I feel like their fans are cool. Like I don't know. Like I hate the Cardinals. Sorry. I hate the Cubs. I really strongly hate the Pirates and anything Pittsburgh. That's the one thing Cleveland and Cincinnati people can agree on in the state of Ohio. So we hate Pittsburgh. I've been there. I've been to PNC Park. It's all right. I will say, I don't know why everyone's like happy about. I have to go again, but I will say, Busch Stadium for the Cardinals, absolutely my favorite state ballpark I've been to ever.
All right.
It
We're getting
kicks ass.
a little love there. I'll take it.
I disagree
I
on
will
that,
take
but
It is amazing. It's my favorite
Yes,
place.
I did
hate-
read about the Reds and kind of the Pennsylvania state team rivalries because the Reds actually beat mostly the Pirates, but also the Phillies throughout multiple times, mostly throughout the 70s. So that makes sense as part of the history too, and just being so close. But the Reds had winning teams during the rest of the 1960s. Unfortunately, didn't come up with any championships. They did come particularly close in 1964, and this is timely as we're talking about the Cardinals. They lost out by 1 game to the Cardinals in 1964. So when they did not win that pennant, the then owner, Bill DeWitt, who I did not know this, Bill DeWitt is the father of the current owner of the St. Louis Cardinals, grandfather of the president of the St. Louis Cardinals. He started selling off key components of the team in anticipation of relocating the franchise. In response to this threat, the women of Cincinnati banded together to form the Rosie Reds to petition that DeWitt keep the franchise in Cincinnati. The Rosie Reds are still in existence, and they are currently the oldest fan club in Major League Baseball. Jules, are you familiar with the Rosie Reds? Do you hang out with these gals?
Familiar with the Rosie Reds. I actually marched with the group last year on opening day, like in the parade.
That's
It was very cute.
amazing.
Very
that's
cute.
so cool.
I love it.
I
Such good
love that,
vibes.
like, I mean, there's all kinds of like, I don't want to get too into the weeds on this because it's just not worth spending time on when we are celebrating Reds baseball, but there's still like just so much ridiculous like hate and male insecurity around women in sports.
Oh, yeah.
This was in the 1960s, y'all, that women band together to keep the Cincinnati Reds in
Yeah,
Cincinnati.
I mean, like, so what you're saying is the Reds wouldn't be here if it weren't for women. So shout out to my women. I was not even a thought in anyone's head yet, but I was coming in like 40 years. Yeah.
Exactly. You have a long, proud lineage of strong women Reds fans. So in the late 1960s, all players coming to the Reds were required to shave and cut their hair for the next 3 decades in order to present the team as wholesome. Quote. In the early 1980s, enforcement of this rule kept the Reds from actually having star reliever and Ohio native Raleigh Fingers on their team, as he would not shave his trademarked handlebar mustache in order to join the team. This rule was officially rescinded in 1999. I did not realize this ever was a thing about the Reds because obviously these days the Yankees have a similar rule still today, although Yankees players are permitted to have mustaches. So whatever. How do we feel about the facial hair thing?
I think it's stupid. It doesn't impact how you play or like it's just, I think it's straight up stupid. It makes me laugh every time. I'm like,
what do you think, John? Is there any validity to it?
What?
Oh, I was just going to ask John if he thinks there's any validity to it.
It's I think for our generation, it's like a crazy thing to think that it was ever a thing. I'm sure back then it was not. I mean, to go back, with one of the first teams to really kind of not be that way was the Oakland A's in the 70s.
Yes.
So they had Catfish Hunter, they had Reggie Jackson, and I know that was kind of a big deal at the time.
That
So
they kind of let people run wild.
To us, it sounds crazy that it was ever a thing, but I kind of think that like if we had been fans back then, that we probably would have agreed with it.
Yeah.
At the time.
That's a good
People
perspective.
show up to the ballpark in like full suits and everything, and that's crazy.
Yeah.
I show up with shorts and a crop top and Converse. like that's wild.
That is a good perspective. It was just a very different time.
Yeah.
Whenever I think about this facial hair thing, I think about 10 or 12-ish years ago, I worked at Starbucks in college, and you couldn't have visible tattoos working at Starbucks. and you think about that now, and it's just like so weird. But yeah, there's a lot of interesting things that have changed rather quickly, I guess. Okay, we're getting to some of the good stuff here. The 1972 Reds won the NL West in baseball's first ever strike-shortened season, and they defeated the Pittsburgh Pirates in a 5-game playoff series. They then faced those Oakland Athletics in the World Series, where 6 of the 7 games were decided by 1 run. Drama. The Reds won a 3rd NL West crown in 1973 after a dramatic second-half comeback, but they ultimately lost the NL pennant to the New York Mets. With 1975 coming around, the Big Red Machine lineup is solidified with the Great 8, including some names that I'm sure all baseball fans would know, like Pete Rose. He started in the outfield, ended up playing third base, Ken Griffey as an outfielder. And during the season, the Reds compiled 2 notable streaks. One, they won 41 out of 50 games in one stretch. And they also went an entire month without committing any errors on defense. So yeah, I'd say that'll get you rising the ranks in any division in baseball. In the 1975 season, Cincinnati clinched the NL West with 108 victories before sweeping the Pittsburgh Pirates in 3 games to win the NL pennant. They went on to face the Boston Red Sox in the World Series, splitting the first 4 games and taking Game 5. After a 3-day rain delay, the 2 teams met again in Game 6, considered by many to be the best World Series game ever. The Reds were ahead 6-3 with 5 outs left when the Red Sox tied the game on former Red Bernie Carbo's 3-run home run. Oh, brutal. This was his second pitch hit home run in the series. After a few close calls both ways, here comes Carlton Fisk to hit a dramatic 12th inning home run off of the foul pole in left field and give the Red Sox a 7-6 win and force Game 7. Cincinnati wins Game 7 and gave the Reds their first championship in 35 years, and the Reds have not lost a World Series game since Carlton Fisk's home run. That's pretty epic. John, how often does your dad relive these glory days?
I mean, somewhat often. I mean, it's kind of funny because even though that's when he was a teenager, he actually takes, I know you'll get to it, he takes more satisfaction in the 1990 World Series.
Okay.
For other reasons. But I do want to make a point. If anyone wants to read about the 1975 World Series, there's a book called Game 6 that's literally about Game 6. And it is phenomenal.
Awesome.
I can't remember off the top of my head who the author is, but I have it on my bookshelf. It's a very good book to read because it's from both the Red Sox and Reds perspectives.
Oh, nice.
So,
okay, cool. I will find the link to it like on Amazon or wherever and throw it in the show notes because, I definitely need to check that out.
I want to say the author's last name was Frost, but I could be wrong on that.
We'll check it out. We'll find it. Okay, we're still in the 70s here. The Reds won the NL West by 10 games in 1976 and went undefeated in the postseason. Of course, we already knew that because they're still on a World Series winning streak to this day. They swept the Phillies to return to the World Series where they beat the Yankees. Came back around. This was only the second ever sweep of the Yankees in the World Series, and the Reds became the first NL team since the 21-22 New York Giants to win consecutive World Series championships. I did not know this about the Reds, that they are one of the only teams to win consecutive championships. So to date, the 1975 and 76 Reds were the last NL team to repeat as champions. I think this is so important that we are like reliving this because we're going to get there, but we know where the Reds have been at the last couple of decades. And there are so many fans that just baseball fans as a whole that just don't even realize the rich winning history of this team. In his last season as a Red in 1978, Pete Rose tied for baseball's second longest hit streak ever in 44 games. This is also the season that he earned his 3,000th hit. And the only no-hitter of Hall of Fame pitcher Tom Seaver's career came against the St. Louis Cardinals on June 16th, 1978. The Big Red Machine started to dismantle in the late 1970s. Pete Rose, who had played almost every position for the team except pitcher, shortstop, and catcher since 1963, signs with the Philadelphia Phillies as a free agent. That's brutal. The Reds won the 1979 NL West behind the pitching of Tom Seaver, but they were eliminated in the NL playoffs by the Pirates. In 1981, the Reds had the best overall record in baseball. This is wild, but they finished second in the division in both of the half seasons that resulted from the midseason players' strike, so they missed the playoffs. I would have been so mad as a 1981.
Best overall record, too.
That's insane. So to commemorate this, I guess they took a team photo, which I have to look up. I hope it's out there somewhere, that they're holding a banner that says baseball's best record in 1981. So it's like we won the most games and all we got was this photo. By 1982, the Big Red Machine had officially broken down and the Reds lost 101 games. In August of 1984, Pete Rose was reacquired and hired to be the Reds player manager. There were many second place finishes for the Reds in the mid to late 80s. And in 1989, following the release of the Dowd reports, this is when Pete Rose is accused of betting on baseball games. Rose was banned from baseball by Commissioner Bart Giamatti, who declared him guilty of, quote, conduct detrimental to baseball. I got to ask you guys, Jules, what is the relationship with Reds fans and Pete Rose these days?
Well, from a baseball standpoint, we're just strictly talking baseball, not his life outside of it. A lot of people think he didn't deserve that and should be in the Hall of Fame and everything. So that's a baseball standpoint. I will say outside of baseball, he's a very problematic person. So you can cut that part out. But I'm just letting you know that's how my opinion on him is skewed by that, because I just genuinely, not a fan. But from a baseball standpoint, I do think it was a little ridiculous to be banned from baseball.
Yeah, if you're just looking at the resume.
Yeah, I just think that's ridiculous.
Like, what do you think?
I get it's against the rules, but...
So, yes, I think saying he's problematic off the field is probably the nicest way of putting it for Pete Rose. In more ways than just the gambling aspect. But we'll leave it at that. So, again, I think the feelings towards him is generational. Again.
Yeah.
People like our generation that never saw him play and only know how he is now kind of feel differently than those who saw him play, particularly because he is 100% a local Cincinnati kid too.
Right.
Like, grew up on the west side of Cincinnati. Like, the only other player that really comes somewhat close in the Reds history is Billy Larkin.
Right.
And but he agreed to be banned from baseball. So, like, that included the Hall of Fame. So, like, I don't feel bad for him because he agreed to it.
Yeah, that's fair.
This is gonna sound bad to say, but I think he eventually gets in the Hall of Fame. I just don't think he's gonna be alive for it.
Yeah. I could see that. That is an interesting point. And I don't know. Yeah, it's such a tricky conversation.
Well, it's timely with what's happened with Ohtani news dropping too.
Yes, because it's so sad when there's like all these. I mean, Pete Rose, he did so many great things for the franchise in multiple decades, and just to have like such a hard fall from grace, and then there's all that weird personal stuff too. It's like all I can compare it to is like finding out that like Santa's not real, right? Sorry if your kids are listening, but Yeah, it's such a bummer. Well, okay, let's talk about the 1990 Reds because as John alluded to, it's a good time to be a Reds fan. In 1990, the Reds under new manager Lou Piniella made a strong run all season straight to the playoffs where they ultimately swept the heavily favored Oakland Athletics in 4 straight games, extending a winning streak in the World Series to 9 consecutive games. So that makes sense knowing your dad's relationship, John, with the A's, that this would be one that like really slapped for him.
You guys want to know kind of an interesting story if you guys don't know about that time?
Yeah, go for it.
So, the Reds, and I'm going to just because it's about the Reds, have had a history of having interesting owners, for lack of a better word. And back then, the owner was Marge Schott. I'm not going to go into anything with her. But if anybody knows anything about her,
Marge.
So one of the biggest players on the team back then was Eric Davis. And he got hurt in Oakland, I believe, trying to dive for a catch. Don't hold me on that, but he like lacerated his kidney or his spleen or something.
Yes, I did read about this. Yeah, it was his kidney. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then he went to the hospital, and the Reds won, and the team, she just left him there in Oakland.
What?
He had to come back by him, like on his own.
With you. Wow.
And then it just won the World Series. So
right. Congrats, you're a World Series winner.
Yeah,
we forgot about
you.
Yeah. So I think that's kind of a crazy story because you talk to any Reds fans about owners, and it's kind of a history of fun things, past owners. But I'll leave it at that.
Good story to kind of sum that weirdness up for sure. Yes. It was a great ending to the 1990 season for everyone except Eric Davis. Woo! Well, in 1994, the Reds were put in the newly created National League Central Division, which is where we know and love them now, with the Chicago Cubs, St. Louis Cardinals, and the Pittsburgh Pirates, and for a time, the Houston Astros. Remember those days when the NL Central Astros? Mm-hmm. The Reds were actually the first team to ever win the Central Division. I did not know that either, and respect. Got to give it up. In 1999, the Reds won 96 games, led by manager Jack McKeon, who is still a fixture. I feel like a familiar name in baseball these days, but they lost to the New York Mets in a 1-game playoff. Despite an 85-77 finish in 2000 and being named the 1999 NL Manager of the Year, McKeon was fired after the 2000 season. He's had a couple instances like that, because I think he was fired by the Marlins too after he did like a fine job. Poor Jack McKeon. Anyway, the Reds did not have another winning season until 2010. Their current stadium, Great American Ballpark, opened in 2003 with an exciting team of MLB favorites like outfielder Ken Griffey Jr., shortstop Barry Larkin, and first baseman Sean Casey. The Reds were still like struggling to be competitive, though, even with these star names on their roster. And that was really from the lack of investment in the farm system since the early 1990s from the aforementioned owner. And that left the team a little too thin on depth and talent. So the mid-2000s brought more poor pitching and poor records, but some exciting hitting. Ken Griffey Jr. hit his 500th career home run in 2004. Now, Jules, I know you were like just a little child then when Ken Griffey Jr., but was he one of like the first Reds players that you knew about?
At 4 years old?
Well, I know
the about him. I don't think I remember like hearing that name really when I was younger. The only memory I have goes back to when I was probably like 10 or 11 years old.
Okay. That's fair, because that's when like Albert Pujols came up in my like 10-year-old year, and that is really when I remember. So who is like the first Reds player that you remember being a fan of? Joey Votto?
Definitely. Yeah, Joey Votto. I remember Billy Hamilton, Brandon Phillips, Frazier. Trying to think, Jay Bruce. Like I remember, I remember them a lot.
Okay, cool. So Ken Griffey Jr. was still a little before your time.
Yeah, a little before my memory.
I got one of my nephews who is like 9 now, a Ken Griffey Jr. shirt, because I'm like, this is part of your baseball education. You need to know. He is one of the guys you need to know about. Okay, 2004 saw the opening of the Cincinnati Reds Hall of Fame, which includes all kinds of cool stuff, including Reds uniforms dating back to the 1920s and a baseball marking every hit Pete Rose had during his career. That sounds insane. John, have you been to the Reds Hall of Fame?
Multiple times. It is. I wish, and I don't know if other teams maybe just don't have quite. I mean, the Reds are the oldest team; they have a ton of history, but they have a phenomenal job with the Hall of Fame Museum. They did there. Like, they have new exhibits every couple months. They do a very, very, very good job, to just kind of put it plainly. I highly recommend any baseball fan to visit there if they go see a game in Cincinnati, or even if they're just in Cincinnati.
We're getting towards the end here. Let's see. Yes, the mid to late 2000s did bring a revamping of the farm system. So good news. We're signing young talent that could potentially lead to the team to success in the future. In 2010, here we go, Jules. The NL MVP, Joey Votto, and Gold Glovers Brandon Phillips and Scott Rowland. Along with their help, the Reds posted a 91-71 record and were NL Central champions. The Reds became only the second team in Major League Baseball history to be no hit in a postseason game when I'm sure you remember this, John, the Phillies, Roy Halladay. God, I remember him all too well in the postseason as well. He shut down. At that time, the Reds were the National League's #1 offense, and they were swept out of the National League Division Series by the Phillies.
So I should point out that the backtrack, the previous time they made the playoffs before them was 95. So I was 2 years old when that happened. So it took until I was 17 years old to see the Reds play playoff game. And the very first playoff game, they get no hit.
Oh, and I'm sure there's so many. I mean, that's a whole generation of fans. Like, I'm very close to your age. That would, anyone around our age.
I should point out anything. I don't know if you have this written down, but 95 was actually the last time they won a playoff game. Won a playoff series.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
I have that written down, even though I knew that. But I had to Google. I'm like, what is their record?
In my mind?
In my lifetime, they are 2-9 in the postseason. 2-9.
Yeah, we can skip past the point when we talk about 2012.
We won't have to talk about that. It was a bad time in my life.
They still have the World Series winning record going, so all they need to do is get back to the World Series.
Yeah,
exactly.
We're good to go. Yeah, we can just kind of skate over this. After winning the division in 2012 and a wild card spot in 2013, the Reds were one of the worst teams in baseball for multiple seasons from 2014 to 2019. Because of their lack of success, they were forced to part with many star players over these years. And this is kind of the beginning of the Reds, the makeup of the Reds that we see. It's the makeup of the team that we are experiencing now, where there aren't a ton of tenured guys, but there is a lot of really exciting young talent. So here's what I want to ask you guys about now. John, is there a current player in the Reds system, whether or not he's played a day in the major leagues thus far, that you are particularly excited about that other fans of other teams might not have on their radar yet?
All right. I am going to give two answers, one currently on the team and one prospect. Then
go for it.
So on the team, if you're a Reds fan, you love Will Benson. There's no way around it.
I love Will Benson.
He
oh my God.
Was a first-round draft pick, got called up by Cleveland. I saw him play here.
Nice.
A little bit of a backstory. I have a 3-year-old son whose name is Benson.
Yes.
So it's kind of other reason to enjoy having a player named Benson on the team. But didn't have a great debut, kind of a crowded outfield at the time. So the Reds basically were like, about just over a year ago, before spring training last year, we're like, we seem like this guy would be a good fit. And then he came up and played terribly, and then got sent back down to Louisville. And then I think he got called back up just because of injuries at the time. And then still wasn't playing well. The Reds won a series at Wrigley, and as they were leaving Wrigley, they flew to Boston to play at Fenway. And apparently on the flight, Joey Votto came up to Will Benson and said,
yes,
we're going to help you figure this out. And ever since then, he played at like an all-star level. So He also last year I bought batting practice tickets and I got a ball from him. So if any chance Will Benson is listening to this, I wouldn't mind
love
getting it
you, Will
signed for my
Benson.
son.
Will Benson, I would die for you.
Yeah.
I remember that story. You guys, every
Yeah.
day, I don't think there's a way I could love Joey Votto more. And every day I love Joey Votto more. I do remember that story. I had not remembered that it was Will Benson. So I'm glad you shared that again.
In terms of minor league, because the Reds, I mean, obviously they just graduated a ton of prospects. It's tough. So I kind of look a little bit further down the players to get excited for. I'll give two quickly. Anyone that watched the College World Series knows who Rhett Lauder is. There was at least a chance he could make his debut with the Reds this year. I don't think it necessarily happens, but if
somebody gets hurt,
and if he just, I mean, he's probably starting the year in Double-A, which is Chattanooga, and Andrew Abbott did that last year and was Red by June. So it could happen.
I think you told me about Andrew Abbott the last time that we spoke as well.
A little lower, he's still got a little bit of work to do, but I'm really high on Cam Collier. He was their first pick, I believe, in 2022.
Yeah,
2021. I don't remember. They had the 17th pick, and he basically fell to the Reds because he was going to need a higher signing bonus, and the Reds had more pool money to sign him. So kind of just coincidence more than anything. But I mean, if he can get, he's young. He was like in JUCO at like 17 years old, I think.
Wow.
So
he was really.
If he gets his swing figured out, I mean, he's a franchise player, in my opinion. So I've heard rumors, because the Reds have been rumored in trades for the last year for stuff, and I've heard his name has come up a decent amount for other teams would want him, and I don't think they've wanted to move on from him.
Please
so
don't.
Those are mine. I know that's more than one, but
no, that's awesome. I know they're loaded with these kinds of guys who just no one has. If you're not a Reds fan or like deep into prospectdom, you probably don't know. Jules, do you have some others for us?
I said Rhett and Cam as well, pretty much for the same reasons. I feel like I'll add Edwin Awario. I think I'm really excited for him. He just got hurt though, of course. So I'm really excited for him. He's like 19 or 20. He might be 20 now. He's pretty young though.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm really excited for him.
What position?
I believe he's shortstop, third base. I believe he switches between the two. I could be completely wrong, but I'm like 99% sure that's where he plays. Because then people are like, when we got him, they're like, well, we have like a million shortstops. So yeah.
Yeah. The infield is.
The thing is if you can play shortstop, which in my opinion is arguably one of the hardest positions in the infield. I mean, you can play pretty much anywhere in the infield. I'm not saying it's that easy everywhere, but I mean, I was a first baseman, but I don't think I could have played shortstop, but I feel like a shortstop could play first base. You know what I mean? Like,
I mean, if you look at the Padres, like their entire team is shortstops and they're playing all the positions. So I think you're onto something there. That's probably fair to assume.
They actually think Arroyo might be the best shortstop in the system defensively.
Okay, cool.
Which is saying something when Ellie's your shortstop and McLean second base, and I actually think he might be the best shortstop currently on the roster.
I saw him hit a home run last week. Edwin came up and hit a home run, and I was like, oh, shit. Okay, cool.
That's pretty awesome.
So the infield is loaded for a good reason, because these sound like, there's just too many guys that you really can't let go of. I don't hate that.
Yeah.
All right, let's just wrap up the history, bring it up to current day. In the pandemic shortened 2020 season, the Reds did earn their first postseason berth since 2013 as the 7th seed in the expanded playoffs, but they did lose their first round series against the Atlanta Braves. Yep. The Reds finished the 2021 season with a record of 83-79, good for third in the NL Central. I mentioned this. Well, see, I mentioned this because this year, Fangraphs predicts the Cardinals to win the Central Division with the record of 83-79. So just back in 2021, that was good for third place.
The dang Cardinals is why we didn't make the playoffs in 2021.
Well, yeah, we can. 2022, we can just pretend that season did not happen. I sat through 55 games that year.
Wow.
person.
Well, I do want to bring it up because I think the 2022 season is really dictating baseball's their interpretation of the Reds right now, and I don't think that's fair. So in 2022, the Reds started out the regular season with a tragic 3-22 record. If you knew anything about the Reds in 2022, this is what you knew. They could not win a game. They finished the season with a record of 62-100. But in 2023, the Reds were up for a wild card berth until the final weekend of the season. And I said this prior to the 2023 season, and it wasn't just because I wanted to keep John in my good graces. I knew that the Reds were going to win at least 75 games. I was like, there is no way. But everyone was like, I mean,
everyone flamed me.
It was such a fluke. There were so many injuries that they were plagued by. There was just so many circumstances that made them as bad as they were that are they going to be a playoff contender? I mean, probably not, but there's no way that they were going to be as bad again. And they were not. They finished over 500. Yeah, exactly. They finished over 500, 82-80. That was 20 more games than the season.
They weren't going to start the season 3-21 again.
Yeah, that's how you would, like I said, you would have to try to do that. And the thing that I kept saying, because I was telling my dad even going into 2023, I was like, they didn't make any moves to make them worse. I'm not saying they made moves to make them loads better, but they didn't get worse. Right. And then you have to try to do that bad. There's a lot of injuries, it just wasn't working out. But I will say it was like a span of May through June-ish, July. They were playing right at 500 baseball. They were actually playing good baseball. It's just they screwed themselves over because they started out 3-21, 22 or whatever, and lost that many games. So it's no matter how many games you won, you were still going to be in that hole. You dug yourselves a hole. So I was not they did way better than I expected last year, but also I didn't expect them to be bottom of the league again by any means with 100 losses. Yeah. I was thinking right around 500 or above because they're just not that bad. They're just not. It just happened.
Can we talk about that the Reds went 62-100 and got the draft lottery, screwed them out of a top pick, and then they turned around to have a winning record and get a number 2 pick this year?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, they're making it work. 2023 brought the debut of young star Elly De La Cruz, who we've mentioned, who in his 15th career game became the first Red to hit for the cycle since Eric Davis in 1989.
I was there.
I didn't realize that is a sweet, fun statistic. At the end of the season, there was retirement speculation surrounding former MVP Joey Votto, as we've talked about. The Reds did not pick up Votto's option, and he is now going to play in the Blue Jays organization, which is fun. I'm so glad he landed there because he is from Canada, and it looks like, he's going to find a happy landing spot there. And at least it seemed to be for a positive reason, in that they simply don't have playing time for Votto amongst all the young talent. Now, if you're a baseball fan of any kind over the past couple of decades, you know who Joey Votto is, and you probably love and adore him, as we've talked about here. He's been a big part of the Cincinnati Reds culture. So this is a really fun question that I like to ask, because I think the face of a franchise can tell you a lot about the culture of a team. John, if you could pick one player who is currently in Major League Baseball, who is not on the Reds, that you think fits into the culture, strip away the need to fill any need for the team, doesn't have to be realistic in any way, shape, or form. Just somebody who you're like, that guy should be a Red. Who would it be?
I could not narrow it down to one, but I have 2.
Go for it. Do it.
Okay, so I'm going to go with a player that I should have hated, never did, killed my team, Andrew McCutchen.
Oh, yes. No, I do not.
I loved Andrew McCutchen, and I hated Pittsburgh.
I do. We have always shared that love, John, of Andrew McCutchen, and I see that.
Seems like he's the ultimate player. I mean, at this point, obviously, he's towards the end of his career. I mean, kind of funny that he's one home run away from 300, so kind of cool. I hope it happens in Pittsburgh for him, in all honesty. But I just always loved him. But the other one, I honestly, the Reds do not need another shortstop, but I have to say Francisco Lindor.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I like him.
Being in Cleveland, my wife lived in downtown Cleveland in the mid 2010s. So like we saw him get called up the World
Yeah.
Series season. Like it was crazy to be here. So he's always been one of my favorite players. Like I have his Indians jersey and his Mets jersey.
Nice.
So,
Oh yeah, you do. Yeah, I really admired him last season because I thought, he's on that huge deal with the Mets and things went very askew for them. And I felt like he just continued to show up and play up to his value of that contract, even when the team was nowhere near, needing
he had
him.
a great year last year.
Yeah.
So those were, I couldn't narrow it down between those two. So those would be my two answers. So
Good ones.
barring any players that used to play for the Reds, I should say.
I'm glad that you went around that just to make it more interesting. Okay, Jules, who's your pick?
Okay, so of course I have to look at the other team I do somewhat follow. I really like wow, why did I say like that? I really appreciate Josh Naylor for the Cleveland Guardians. I'm biased. He's one of my favorite players to watch because I love his energy. He's very clutch. He plays with a lot of grit, a lot of emotion, and he's overall just an easy guy to root for. He kind of reminds me when it comes to the energy and just like wanting to be there and wanting to prove everyone wrong and trying to get all these big plays. He reminds me of Will Benson, who's also, as we already said, came from Cleveland. I love my little Cleveland to Cincinnati pipeline or Cincinnati. Like it's hard to not. How do you hate Cleveland when half of our players come from there and we go to there? Like it seems like it happens a lot.
Yeah.
So I really like him. Last year he hit 308 with a 354 on base percentage, 17 home runs, 31 doubles, 97 RBIs, and 10 stolen bases. Oh my God. I love Josh Naylor. I love him. He's so awesome. He's so clutch.
Probably one of the most underrated players in baseball last year. He had such a good year.
Like he could.
You're gonna rip him away from his little brother, Bo.
Well, to be fair, he could technically be ripped away next year because he's free agency and everything. So they're not giving him the money that he wants.
He's also Canadian. Canadians must just like vibe in Cincinnati.
If I had to pick a Cleveland player since I live here, I would 100% pick Stephen Kwan because I love him.
Oh yeah, that was my second pick. I was like, I really like Stephen Kwan too. He's cute. He's adorable. I love Stephen Kwan.
I think it's fun, particularly for these teams that, at least as of late, are not, making any big splashes and signings to kind of dream up, be a little unrealistic. And it does, like, you feel more of the vibe of the Cincinnati Reds franchise when you imagine those kinds of players there. So that's fun. Mm-hmm. I got to ask you guys, do the Reds have a mascot?
Yes.
They have like four.
They have Red Legs, Mr.
What
Red.
Is Red Legs?
Rosie Red and then Gapper. They're like human baseballs. Like, do you know the Mets mascot?
Oh, like, yes, that's
like Met. Ultimately. So we have an older one, a younger dude, and then we have a lady, which is Rosie Red. And then Gapper is just like the weird mascot that like all teams have that no one knows really what he is. And he's like colorful and
yes. Okay.
I like all of them.
John, is your son particularly fond of any of the mascots?
Yeah. So I wasn't sure how he was going to react, but every time he's met the mascots, he seems to have liked them. He met Gapper when he was just over a year old, and he seemed to really like him. So, but the kid's been at Disney World and stuff, so he knows characters. So, but yeah,
that's what really matters. If he gives his approval, then it's worth it.
I know Gapper is sometimes not super liked in the Reds community, but he's for kids.
Yeah, so. He's fun. All right. Okay, to wrap things up today, this might be kind of hard, but I want you to see if you can narrow it down to one particular thing for each of these questions. We're going to talk about the worst part and then the best part of being a Reds fan. Okay. Jules, what is the worst part of being a Reds fan?
Well, I did mention it earlier. I would say one of the worst things for me personally is in my lifetime, I have seen very, very, very few playoff wins, just single games, not series, obviously. They're 2-9 in the postseason. I saw 100 loss season. I was there for half the games. It's really, I think, one of the worst things, but I think it's not really specifically to the Reds. Like, it gets very, very negative, and rightfully so. So that's what I hate, because I'm a very positive person no matter what. So
yeah, and then it's hard to defend when you're like, I mean, yeah, they're sucking again. Oh, yeah, I can see that. John, what do you think is the toughest thing about being a Reds fan?
I think you can make the argument. There's an argument to be made whether or not teams are actually small market or not. It might be better to say that some teams are smaller markets than others. The Reds can spend money. They can. And they probably can spend more money than what they currently do. But they can't spend what the Dodgers and Yankees of the world are doing. That's just true. So you kind of have to get used to the fact that your teams have a more limited budget of what they're going to spend. So sometimes that comes down to the fact that you really have to appreciate the players that you really like when you have them, because like at the end of the day, Reds fans are going to forever love Nick Castellanos for his season and a half being here.
Yeah.
But you know, whether or not it was the right decision for him to leave, that's up to him.
Yeah.
Whatever for him. But you kind of have to get used to that we're most likely not going to have a Joey Votto again.
Right. That's kind of a tough thing with a silver lining. I like how you put that, because it is hard to get attached to these guys, especially if they do great things for your team and they fit into the community. But then to know, like, don't get too attached, because they likely won't hang around for long. All right. Well, we got to end it, Jules, on a positive note, because I am also a very positive person. This is a positive podcast. What is the best part of being a Reds fan?
I think the best part is just, and you could probably say this about everyone, but just the history here. The fans here are just so passionate and so excited about baseball. And it's just one of my favorite things. Like, and I would say we're relatively, besides on Twitter, I feel like we're relatively nice fans. Like when visiting teams come to town, I've heard that we're nice. So that's something I can have pride in. And even though we've had those rough seasons, there's still always going to be that support, where we're definitely a big baseball city. So that's something I love about being a Reds fan, is even if we all are a small market, we still show up.
That is such a good one, because I mean, Tampa Bay Rays, great example from last postseason. There are teams that can be really good and find success in all kinds of ways that don't have the baseball town to show up for them. So I think that's a great one. John, what would you say? What's the best thing?
I would like this to not end up being how I feel as my life progresses, but it's fun to a degree to be a fan of the underdog.
Yeah.
Like, we're the Reds. In terms of national relevance, we're probably at the bottom. Outside of Cincinnati, in the region, people probably don't really care a super amount about the Reds unless they're from that area and moved elsewhere. So it's kind of cool to have your own. Like I said earlier, we were talking, growing up in Toledo, not a ton of Reds fans.
Yeah.
It was cool to be a fan of my own team. So I'm hoping that they're starting to enter into a, period of time where they're very relevant, and it's cool to be a Reds fan necessarily, because there's been a lot of times it hasn't been. But
I agree with that, though. I know there's something to argue that, like, the Cardinals, are easier to be a fan of overall, but they're not like the Yankees and the Dodgers too, where like it's almost like a pop culture thing to be a fan. Like, you don't have to be a baseball fan to have a Dodgers hat or a Yankees hat or whatever. It's like and there's a lot of people who have become fans of those teams because their teams weren't good. So I completely agree with you. And I think that's a really cool thing. And it's been really neat to hear you guys talk about how, even though there have been a number of seasons and like long periods of time, not just now, but in the past too, where the team has been down and out, that the fan base has never dwindled. And I think that is something that's really special about the Cincinnati Reds. Well, thank you so much for hanging out with me and educating our listeners more about your rich and wonderful fandom. John, tell us where we can find you and keep up with you on social media.
My, I guess, X handle, I will say now, is at the Jowski. So and then J, and then my last name, all one word. I do have a private account, but I will typically allow, if anyone requests, I'll typically let it through as long as you're a real person.
Yeah, as long as you're nice and you really like baseball. Come on over.
Yeah, I'm pretty cool with that. And that, I would say, if you do, most of my tweets are either baseball related or fatherhood related. So,
Yes.
So if that doesn't bother you,
warm, wholesome content. We love it. Jules, where can we find you? And tell us about, you are launching a new podcast. So tell us about that too.
All right. Well, you can find me on pretty much everything. Instagram. I'm going to call it Twitter. TikTok,
Yes,
Not So Cool Jules. I make it easy for everybody. Not So Cool Jules. Easy to remember. I don't know how you could forget that. I am starting a new podcast. We hope to have the first episode out by next week, hopefully before opening day. But we all know that sometimes production issues happen and things don't get done on time. And that's totally fine. But yeah, we're having a podcast, obviously, and focus on Cincinnati, whether it's sports, whether it's music. Me and my friend Liv are both really into the sports scene, obviously. We go to a lot of games together. We live right across the street from each other, but we're also in the pop culture as well. And growing up, I never really found a podcast or anything that really puts my two interests together. Like I listen to sports podcasts and then I listen to the pop culture podcast. So now we're just kind of making it into one. So that is what we're focusing on.
Yes, that's awesome. I agree. As you were saying that, I'm like, I got my sports lineup, I got my pop culture lineup. But obviously, even if it's just the three of us right here, we're just prime examples of your target audience. So yeah, I will put all of your handles in the show notes. And if you find Jules on social media, you will find her podcast as it rolls out. And I had the Pirates episode last week, and I felt really weird wrapping it up with those guys too, of like, I feel like I should wish you a happy baseball season. I obviously only want it to be so happy for you for personal reasons, but I really hope that we all get to enjoy just some good baseball this season. And thank you again for your time and your sharing your baseball fandom with us.
Yeah, thank you for having us on.
Thank you.
Big thanks again to John and Jules for joining us today. So fun to learn more about their team and their love and their excitement around the game, which we are all super amped up for, specifically this week. So wishing you the happiest of opening days wherever you are around the country. Please share how you are celebrating and enjoying America's favorite pastime, our favorite pastime. And make sure you're following the show. Hit that subscribe button if you're on YouTube or on your favorite podcast platform. Your support means a lot. If you feel so inclined to rate and review, again, super helpful for the show so that we just keep pumping it out and we stay engaged here together all season long. Hey, have the best time consuming all of the baseball and all the good stuff this week. And I will see you next week on Peace, Love, and Baseball.